Grigori here from Ping Pong Gym, and today we will go through how to learn push in table tennis and then how to take it to the next level. So stick with me and master one of the most basic skills in table tennis. Push is one of the ways that you deal with a backspin ball, and it is quite essential to understand how it's performed because one cannot be called a beginner in table tennis if they cannot perform push from both sides at least decently. So let's break it down and understand how to do it from both sides. Let's address forehand push first. It all starts from basic ready position where you do not know where the ball is going to come. Let's start with the angle of our racket. When push is arriving, we have to open our racket to about somewhere between 20 and 50 degrees. So anywhere between range of this to this. It all depends on the strength of underspin that the incoming ball has, but more on that later. Let's stick with the 30 degrees open angle of the racket right now and understand how the motion works. The reason behind why we keep the racket open is in physics. If an incoming ball has an underspin and it touches our racket in a flat condition like this one, it's going to fall straight off to the down. So as we open the racket, when the underspin ball touches open surface like this one, it's going to bounce off the table. So in terms of the way that you should be holding the racket, the grip itself has to be loose, but not too much. So a bit firmness has to be present, so that you do not start to shake your hand as you perform the movement. The motion itself has to be performed with your forearm by going from up slightly downwards diagonally. As you reach the ball and are about to perform this diagonally downwards motion, it's essential that you contract this angle to the right in case of a right-hander. You can see that it's going slightly back. This will be the backswing for the push. So you contract this angle, and as you arrive and as you are about to start the motion, that's when you extend it and lead it forwards and down. The reason it's called a push is because you are pushing the ball with your forearm and delivering it into the opponent's side of the table. The degree of how much diagonally down you go depends on the amount of backspin on the incoming ball, which we will discuss afterwards as well. At this stage of learning how to push and practicing it so that it becomes consistent, I would recommend for all beginners and intermediate players to refrain from using their wrist because it's very hard to control how much power you exert with the wrist. So for now, my recommendation is to master your forearm movement to make those pushes from the forehand side consistent. We will talk about how to utilize the wrist, but that's going to be a bit later in this video in a more advanced chapter. Now, two very important elements when it comes to a forehand push: where and when do we contact the ball? You can see this ball right here. Our contact is going to be just underneath at about 7 o'clock of the ball. For a more complete illustration, please take a look right here. Now we know where to contact the ball. The second question that remains is, when do we do so? And the answer is different from a beginner to intermediate player compared to a more advanced player. So as a beginner, you are trying to learn how to perform it, and as an intermediate player, you are trying to make it consistent. In which case, I would recommend to let the ball bounce to its highest point and contact at the highest point or as it starts to descend slightly. The reason behind my recommendation is because as a beginner you are trying to learn how it feels to work under the ball, to take a slice out of it. As an intermediate player you are trying to make it consistent. In both cases, you need to take your time to approach the ball properly and really work on developing that feeling of going under the ball, applying backspin of your own and delivering it over the other side of the table. So this is how it happens for a beginner to intermediate player. We wait for the ball to rise to the highest point or slightly after it starts descending, and then we perform the motion. But in case of an advanced player, what you need to do is to take it right after the bounce. Did you see the difference? Let me explain why that happens. Since 2014-2015, once the celluloid balls were replaced with the plastic ones, there has been something different going on. The bounce height of a plastic ball is higher, which means that if you contact it at the highest point above the net, when it crosses over to the other side and bounces there, it's going to rise to the same height. So that's why you see all the professional players, when they are into the short game, pushing each other, they always try to be there at the right moment, right after it bounces, to make the bounce that their opponent receives also really short and low. But as I mentioned, for a beginner or intermediate player, I certainly recommend letting the ball bounce up and work on developing the feeling of going under the ball. So the main idea of where to catch the ball in relation to your body is slightly longer than your forearm's length, right outside of your body. So as a right-hander, right outside my right hip. So this is where I am, and this is where I contact the ball. So to go like this, it's approximately 20 to 25 centimeters outside of my body to the right. And finally, let's not forget the most important element in every kind of table tennis stroke, which is movement. In case of a forehand push, sometimes the incoming ball is really short, sometimes maybe it's a bit to the side or a long one. In any case, as a right-hander, you are going to be using your right leg to bring your body close to the ball. So never extend with your hand only, because you're going to lose control on the ball afterwards. Always bring your body near the ball and then perform the motion that we talked about and reset and recover afterwards into a ready position again. So we mentioned that how much you open the angle of your racket depends on the incoming ball and the kind of backspin that it has. So in case the incoming ball has a heavy backspin, then about 20 degrees of open angle is recommended, because otherwise it's going to jump right into the net. As you learn how to read the spin, if you feel that the incoming ball does not have too much backspin, in that case you can close the racket angle upwards to maybe around 50 degrees. So anywhere between 20 degrees and 50 degrees is acceptable for the push, because it's going to depend on the amount of underspin that the incoming ball has. As for the backhand push, once again, let's start with the angle of the racket, which is similar to what we talked about the forehand. Anywhere from 20 to 50 degrees is acceptable and is going to work, provided that you understand what kind of backspin the incoming ball has. So we understand the angle of the racket, degree to which it has to be open, depending on the incoming ball. Now for the motion itself. If in case for the forehand, as we mentioned, we had to contract this angle to the right, in case of right-hander, this time we need to contract the same angle but inwards towards our body. So this is going to be backswing for our backhand push. The motion is once again same to what is performed from the forehand side. We get to the ball and we diagonally push the ball downwards by extending our forearm and expanding the angle right here between our upper and lower arm. Where do we contact the ball? Well, the same place we do for the forehand push. Right underneath and slightly behind. For a better illustration, you can see right here where to contact the ball. In terms of when to contact the ball, the same principles that we covered for the forehand push applies here as well. If you are a beginner or an intermediate player, I absolutely recommend letting the ball bounce to its highest point and then work on developing that feeling of slicing something gently under the ball. And when you move, or in case you are already an advanced player, in that case, my recommendation is to, if you can, obviously during a match, but in trainings, to work on developing how to deal with them right off the bounce. Naturally, we cannot neglect the importance of movement in case of a backhand push as well. In case of a right-hander, obviously I'm using my right leg to bring my body close to the ball so that I maintain control over it, perform the motion, and return to the ready position. And once again, if you are a beginner or an intermediate player, please avoid using your wrist into this, at least until you get very consistent with it. And now, tips for the players who have passed the threshold of making their pushes really consistent. Two things that you can do different in practice. Firstly, it's, as mentioned, taking ball as early as possible right off the bounce. The reason being that it's going to make the bounce on the opponent's side of table lower as well, and very hard for them to initiate an attack. Secondly, you can start utilizing a very tiny bit of movement of your wrist in order to add that bit of more backspin on the ball and make it much harder for the opponent to initiate an attack. The wrist involvement is done in a very tiny way in order to keep it under control, because large movements in a short game is going to lead to a disaster. So from forehand side, this is what occurs. So from out of your body, you just as much as you use the forearm to go diagonally downwards, the same applies to the wrist. The only difference being is that you initiate the wrist movement only after your forearm already started the inertia, and you just add it right before the contact with the ball. This type of movement occurs from the backhand side, but the same principles apply. First, the forearm starts the movement, and only then do you start to engage wrist as well, right before the contact. Now, obviously, push is not always going to be short. Often you are going to receive a long one, in which case, once again, if you are at least an intermediate player, you can engage your wrist well enough. Now, normally I would recommend using a topspin if the push is really long, which allows you to drop the ball and attack it well enough. But there are cases where you cannot perform that. So in such cases, you can obviously use your forearm movement more completely and also add wrist to send the ball with heavy backspin on the opponent's side of the table. Mind you that when you do so on a long push, the opponent is also going to receive a push near their baseline, which makes it easy for them to attack. As a modern defender myself, you can quite often see in defenders' game that they wait for the ball to go high up, and that's when they perform the push with quite a long motion and also adding wrist. I'm not talking about chop, I'm talking about the push on the table. This is done because us defenders like to have time. And when you perform the long push, you add backspin, you send it to their baseline, which allows you time to step back and watch what's going on. And it also lends you time to prepare how to deal with the incoming shot. If they attack, we are okay with that. But when the game is between attackers, it's all about who's going to attack first, right? And finally, a tip which pertains to beginner, intermediate, as well as advanced players. Similar to serve, push is a weapon best used with deception. Not only deception, but with also analyzing what your opponent is strong at, what they can do well, and where they fail. So it's not an obligation to always return a short push also short, because it's always relative to the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent and their position in that very moment. So if they are slightly expecting a ball towards backhand, then obviously you can calculate that and give them a short push to the forehand. Or maybe if they have a really strong backhand, but they have troubles performing forehand topspins on an underspin ball, then obviously you are meant to exploit that weakness and feed the balls with an underspin to the opponent's forehand. So use it wisely and use it with deception so that it scores the points. But first, understand how to do it correctly and consistently. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be busting out more table tennis coaching and other table tennis related videos in the future. Thank you. Bye.